title it When It's God's Time. I'll be taking my text from Genesis 39 downwards. We're going to be reading different verses, but we're going to start with Genesis chapter 39, and I'll be taking verse 1 to 6. I'll read that out for you real quick. Chapter 31, verses 1 to 6. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guards, an Egyptian, bought him off the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was prosperous, and he was in the house of his master, an Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper with his hand. And Joseph found grace in the sight, and he served him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put his hands in. And it came to pass from time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. I'm sure we all remember the story of Joseph. Yeah. If you're a Bible student and a Bible scholar, you know that Joseph, when he was living with his father and his brothers, he had dreams, and he shared these dreams with the father and with the brothers. And the brothers were jealous. They were all jealous. You know, every time Joseph said something, they were jealous. It seemed that Joseph's father loved him so much, more than the other brothers. So at the end of the day, the brothers now sold him out to some Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites took him to Egypt. And the Bible says that the Ishmaelites sold him to Pharaoh, that was the captain of the guards of Egypt. Now the Bible says here that even in that house, even though he was a slave of Pharaoh, the Bible says that Joseph was highly favored. Everything that he did, everything that Joseph did, turned to gold. So much so that Potiphar put him in charge of everything. He became the general overseer. Even in the house of Potiphar as a slave, Joseph had favor. Now if you read downwards, you see things started going wrong. If you read downwards, we're not going to read right now, but if you read downwards from chapter 6, 7 downwards, everything started going wrong for Joseph. The wife of Potiphar started eyeing Joseph on different occasions. The wife of Potiphar tried to seduce Joseph, but Joseph wasn't interested because he knew that he was highly favored of God. So he wasn't interested. On different occasions, at the end of the day, she tied him into a corner, and Joseph had to run away. He ran away and he left his robe. And the Bible tells us that she screamed, and the other servants came, and they said, "What happened? What happened?" And he said, "Joseph tried to rape me." And if you read the Bible from chapter 19 of the chapter 39, verse 19, if you just look at it real quick, he said, "It came to pass that when his master," I don't know if you're there, chapter 39, verse 19, he said, "And it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound." We're still going to come back to that chapter 20. And he was there in prison. But the Bible says, even in the prison, if you look at chapter 21, but the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to do anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that he did, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. I want you to look at the two different scenarios. In Nigerian palace, you will say somebody went from fire to fry pan. Joseph was doing well where he was with his family. He was sold to the Egyptians. He was sold to Potiphar. While he wasn't happy, but while he was with Potiphar, God showed him favor. Potiphar gave him, he was general overseer of everything, so he was the head of the slaves. At the end of the day, the wife tried to seduce him. Joseph was falsely accused. Potiphar put him into prison. And the Bible says, please look at chapter 20 very well. Most people don't look at that very well. And Joseph's master put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. If you are a Bible student and a Bible scholar, you will know that in those days, Egypt was the richest country in the world. It was the strongest country in the world. I want to believe that they had so many prisons. We can look at it in two different scenarios. Either they had so many prisons, or they had one big prison, a very big prison. But the Bible says that the prison that Joseph went to was a place where the king's prisoners were bound. So if we say there was a very big prison there, the place that Joseph went was the place specially made for the prisoners of the king. He went into the part of the jail where only the prisoners of the king were there. That's what the Bible says. And even in that place, even in the fry pan where he was, the Bible says that in chapter 21, that the Lord was with Joseph. So even among the prisoners, even though he was the newest, he found favor. And the keeper of the prison committed all the prisoners into Joseph's hands. At this point, one will say, well, Joseph should be happy. At least in prison, he's not suffering as other people suffer. When something was to happen, the keeper will come to Joseph and say, Joseph, okay, I want you to be in charge of this. I want you to be in charge of that. I want you to do this. So it looked as if Joseph, even though he wasn't with his family, but at least Joseph would have been a bit happy where he was, because even though he was a prisoner, but he was in charge of all the other prisoners. And these were not ordinary prisoners. These were the king's prisoners. But we'll find out if Joseph was actually happy where he was. Joseph may have been complaining, but the Bible doesn't say that right now. Joseph may have been saying, God, why did this happen to me? What did I do? What did I do to deserve all this? This is not what you showed me in all the dreams. You showed me so many things in the dreams. Why am I moving from here to here, from here, and now I am a slave? Even though I am the king of the slaves, but I'm a slave. The Bible does not really go in depth to tell you how Joseph was feeling. But all the Bible says that Joseph was highly favored. Okay? Then things started happening. We're not going to read, but from chapter 40, if you read from chapter 40, the Bible says, and it came to pass that the king was annoyed with the butler and the baker. Pharaoh himself was annoyed with his butler and the baker. And the Bible says that he put them into the prison because they made him angry. The Bible says Pharaoh put them into the prison. And you don't have to be a mathematician to know that the prison he was going to send them to would be the same prison that Joseph was in. Some people said maybe that's a coincidence. Why didn't he send them to another prison or something like that? But the Bible says that he put them in the house of the captains of the guard into the prison. I'm reading chapter 40 verse 3. And Pharaoh put them in the ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, a place where Joseph was bound. I don't know if you've seen that. Chapter 40, verse 3. I'll read it again. And he put them, he is Pharaoh, he put them in ward, in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound.